for Democrat 40, and we are here to talk, she is here to talk to us about medical marijuana. And I'm sure you all have lots of questions about that. So, with little ado, here you go.
Thanks, guys. I'd like to start off my talk by apologizing. I don't really know for what yet, but I'm sure I'll say something ridiculous that needs it, so I'll just start off with saying I'm sorry. Yeah, just cover my bases. Anyhow, let me tell you what I'm not. I am not an attorney. I am not a police officer. I'm not a physician. I'm not a cannabis expert by any means. I'm not a chemist. But I'll tell you what I am. I'm a wife and a mom with a story, just like every other person in this room. We all have our stories. Mine just happens to involve an illegal substance in the state of Georgia, unfortunately, and actually in the country. So some of you here know my story. Some of you here were around 5 years ago when we moved to Fayette County from Midtown with this little 2.5-year-old peanut, whose name is Abby. And this little 2.5-year-old turned 3 and started biting her arm. And I mean, like T-Rex going after dead meat, just like with the teeth and the just carnivorous growling and unbelievable demonic. What am I doing with this? Aren't I mic'd? Well, oh, that's okay? Oh, okay. Sorry. Unbelievable self-injurious behaviors. And so here we are with this little 3-year-old who could do nothing but bite herself. And if we were holding her, she would try and bite us. And if we let her go, she would go back to biting herself, or she'd try and bite the dog, or she'd bite the countertop, or whatever it was. She's got chipped baby teeth. I kept those. So this started literally out of the blue. I'll never forget. It was February 1st, 2014. I had never seen anything like this before in my life. What is going on? I understood why people 100 years ago, 50 years ago, institutionalized these kids. Because I swore she was possessed. I had no idea why she was behaving this way. She couldn't talk. We knew her diagnosis was partial agenesis of the corpus callosum at that time, meaning she's missing part of her brain. And we knew she had severe autistic behaviors. But the neurological defect in her brain, we realized was there and was going to cause developmental delays and intellectual delays. And so we were prepared for that. We had her in OT. We had her in private speech. All of that kind of fun stuff. But this behavior, where the heck did that come from? And how do you, Chrissy's not in the room, but how do you ignore that? You know, really, when they're drawing blood on their own arm, how do you ignore that? So what we did was we would hold her. And when I say we, I mean my husband and me. We don't have family here. I didn't know this large group of people that I came to know. I didn't know as many of them back then. I knew Raisa. And some other moms, but I really didn't have a lot of support. I didn't have sitters either. It was really tough to go 3, 4, 8 hours a day holding this little kid all day long. What do you do? And that went on for about 9 months. That is the dark side of autism, I call it. It's a very dark side of autism. And if any of you have been in the same room with a child that behaves like that and literally looks at you with their little 3-year-old big blue eyes and like they want to kill themselves. How do you deal with that? And where do you go? You go to doctors, you go to therapists, you go to a Reiki master because you're desperate as hell to try and get answers for this poor little baby. And you think that if somebody puts hands over her head, maybe some of the energy will come out. You try anything you can to get that little child to stop hurting herself. So, my journey after about 9 months of trying over 30 different pharmaceuticals and supplements, and we had a 4-day hospitalization stay that resulted in absolutely no answers other than we don't know why she's doing it, and here's a couple of arm braces so she can't bend her arm to get to it, which are covered with blood, and I kept those. I should have brought them. Anyway, that's depressing. So after about 9 months of this, I just started looking for other answers, as most of us do as parents with kids with disabilities. We are like better than the FBI at coming up with answers. And we will hunt people down until we get the answers we need, right? So I knew of somebody, and actually it was Raisa Chandler that told me to call her. It was a woman named Karen Kane out in Oregon. And I called her and I said, what do I do about this little girl? She said, I don't really know, but I know some people that are into natural stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I watched this video, this blog, or read a blog, excuse me, from this mom who had a 20-year-old with self-injurious behavior son and autism, and she was giving him medical cannabis. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. I wonder how that works. I wonder if I can get some. How do you get that? What do you do? Do you smoke a joint, blow it in her face? What do you do? I had no idea. No idea how to administer medical cannabis. In fact, I didn't even really know the word cannabis was related to weed, because everybody I knew always called it pot or weed or marijuana or something like that. So I just started researching, and I started figuring out that cannabis in the medical form back then was not legal in Georgia. Okay. So I called this Karen Kane that Raisa told me about over in Oregon, and she says, yeah, I know some people. You need to call this woman in Texas. She can tell you what to do. I said, great. So I called this woman in Texas. I told her what was going on with Abby. She said, you got to call this guy out in California. He's the guy who can tell you how to, make the medicine or give it to her while you're already giving her other pharmaceuticals, which at the time, one of them was a benzodiazepine, which, as you all know, is heavy stuff. But it's what we have, right, in the medical world. So I called him. This was in September that year. And I said, look, here's what's going on. My child wants to kill herself, and she's only 3. He said, okay, you're in triage situation. You got to go, I don't care where you go down to the corner, whatever, and you get yourself an ounce of loud weed. And I was like, okay, and I'm writing this down. I'm like, did he say loud? Okay, loud weed. And so I'm writing that down. I had no idea what he was talking about. He says, you need a ton of THC. You got to get on YouTube, learn how to make the oil, and just do it, and just give it to her. And if you need to shotgun her, you do it. I didn't even know what shotgunning was. Do y'all know? That's what I mentioned earlier. That was the whole, and then blowing it. Do y'all know what loud weed is? Anybody in here know what loud weed is? Super high in THC, really stanky, like that awful, pungent marijuana smell, loud weed. So apparently the guys on the street know what loud weed is. You know how you know that one person that can get you that? Or maybe you know more than one. I called that person and I said, look, I know you can get me this. Just get me an ounce. I don't care how much it costs. It was $400 for an ounce. And an ounce is about the size of a sandwich baggie full, right? I paid the $400. I had it sitting there. I went on YouTube. I found out how to make a small batch of Rick Simpson oil. Y'all heard of possibly Rick Simpson oil. And I had it sitting in my house in a cabinet, like in 47 million bags, tied up 100 times because it stunk so bad. It still stunk. I was scared to death to cook it in my own kitchen. I really didn't know what I was doing. I had nobody to ask, how do I do this? How do I make this stuff? And in October, it was October 23rd. It happened on a Friday. I went to school to pick up Abby. At the time, she was only in school for 4 days. And some of you have heard this story a million times, and I apologize. But they were carrying Abby out of the school. I went to pick her up at 1. I say like a battering ram, but it's true. There were 3 of them all lined up, and they had her front, center, and rear. And the front gal had arm guards on, like that you play taekwondo in, to keep from getting bit. And I said, that's it. I don't care anymore if I have to break the law. I don't care anymore if somebody comes to arrest me. I do care if DFACS comes to take her. That was my one biggest fear. But I thought, you know what? Take me to jail, because I'm going to at least try this for my daughter. I kept hearing about how it was helping people with severe behaviors. So that night I went home. I made it for her. She kind of calmed down, so I didn't give it to her that night because I was really scared. But the following Monday, I gave it to her. I said that was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And in 4 days, I had her off of her pharmaceuticals and just on her cannabis, and she's been on it ever since. And it's been almost 4 years. So yeah, I've had her on medical cannabis and 0.05 clonidine at night to help her sleep, because it doesn't matter how much cannabis you put in that kid, she ain't gonna sleep. It's just the way it is. And I have tried over the years all sorts of different doses and all sorts of different concentrations and all sorts of different everything. I've had the opportunity to really, unfortunately, play mad scientist with my kid, but that's what a lot of us parents do with our kids all the time. So that's the background of how I came to be a medical cannabis mom. After that, I decided, this is working for us. Her behaviors decreased, I would say, by 90%. That horrible, self-injurious, raging, yucky stuff almost all went away. She started becoming more happy in school. Her teachers were, and this is one of my other, Abby's classmates' moms over here, but Miss Kathy would be like, what are you doing different? She's amazing. She's smiling. I'm like, I know, she is completely different, but I'm like, I don't know. We're doing the same thing. Like, I couldn't say anything to anybody, and all these mandated reporters are asking me, and I'm like, shush, I can't. Seriously, I wish I could. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Hey, that green plant that looks so evil, it works. It helps people. And I started learning about how much more it was helping people with all sorts of things like seizures and multiple sclerosis and PTSD, and the list goes on and on and on, many of which are on our qualifying conditions here in Georgia, and we'll get into that in a second. But so I started learning more and more about it, and I thought, what the heck, I'm going to go down to the Capitol, and I'm going to start talking to people. I'm going to start advocating for this plant. And I went, and I heard about this guy, Alan Peake, who was a representative from Macon, and I tugged on his shoulder of his coat, and I said, hey, I'm Jennifer, and I'm this mom, and I started doing this. I told him my story. He says, well, that's very compelling. He said, would you be willing to share that in public? And I'm like, how public? No, I didn't. I was really, what do you want me to do? He said, well, I'd like to send a reporter to your house, and I want you to be interviewed by her. Okay. She came. It was Lori Geary, Channel 2, ABC. She came to my house. I told her about medical cannabis. Facebook blew up that night. I'll never forget what Melanie Harper said, but anyway, I won't get into that now. But Melanie, if you're out there listening, was hilarious. Facebook blew up. Everybody started hearing about the fact that I was breaking the law to help my child. The next week, I testified, and this was in January of whatever it was, almost 3 years ago, so 16, that I was breaking the law in the state of Georgia to help my daughter. 2 weeks ago, and I came out of the canna closet a little bit, telling people that I definitely was breaking the law and that I had to get the medicine on the black market. What I didn't tell them at that first testimony was that I was buying the actual plant matter on the black market and making it my kitchen, because that's what, unfortunately, many of us have been forced to do. So 2 weeks ago, I went and testified currently at the, it's kind of funny, it's called the Joint Study Commission. So, tongue-in-cheek, Joint Study Commission for Medical Cannabis and Safe Access in Georgia. I don't know why they chose that, but anyway, they really tried to be serious about it. But I went and testified again that how I have to do what I do and how I have to help my daughter. I still buy the plant matter on the black market. The cost has gone down quite a bit because I've met a lot of people, but I'll tell you, I drove, at the beginning, I drove to Alabama, I drove to Tennessee, I drove to South Carolina, I drove anywhere I had to go to buy the flower. We call it flower in the business, so it's just, yeah. If I say flower, I don't mean lilies. I mean the actual bud material that you use to make the medicine. The funny thing about it, everybody's like, do you smoke it? Like, have you ever tried it and all that kind of stuff? No. I can honestly stand here and tell you I have never smoked her medicine. Like, I've never smoked the product that I use to make it. I wouldn't care if I did. It wouldn't embarrass me to tell you that I did. I think it's a beautiful plant. I have turned completely from a Nancy Reagan, just say no, card-carrying Republican to an if you got it, use it, however it is that helps you, massive libertarian. I'm not going to get into politics right now, but I'm tired of people telling me, I'm tired of people in the law telling me what I can and can't give my child. How do they find that they know what's best for my daughter? How do they find that? Are they a physician? No. Do they live with us in our home? And believe me, I have invited Governor Deal, and I have invited Lieutenant Governor Cagle, and I have invited Marty Harbin to come to my house and see my daughter and live with us for 24 hours and learn what it means to give your daughter a medicine that works. So in the state of Georgia, currently, we have 17 qualifying conditions. They're on that green piece of paper that I gave you. We were the second state in the country to add autism as a qualifying condition a couple of years ago, so that was kind of a neat thing. I really enjoyed that. You can see the medical marijuana rules for Georgia patients. This is straight from the Department of Public Health website. So this is what's on the Department of Public Health website. And you can read through this by yourselves and become familiar with this. I can tell you this, cannabis is not a panacea for everything in the world, but it is a beautiful medicine when it's made well and when we can access it easily. Someday here in Georgia, I think it's going to be a really great option for many, many people, for many, many disabilities and diseases and diagnoses. So currently, the governor this last year set up this joint study commission to determine how we can, as Georgians, have safe access to this medical cannabis. Unfortunately, in the last few years, as these legislators were approving these bills and yay, we were signing them into law, it was like, yes, you can have the medical cannabis, but good luck finding it. They didn't give us any access, zero access. So we're all still having to break the law. We all still have to go on the black market to get the medicine that we need. There's a ton of different types of cannabis oils. There's the kind you see in the dropper on the news when a child is seizing or something like that, and they put the oil in their mouths and it relieves those seizures. There's the thick, black, tar-like substance that's called a concentrate, which is the concentrated version of that tincture. And there are gummies and cookies and there's all sorts of different types of cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. CBD is a big one. If you say CBD oil, to me, that does not mean cannabis oil. That's not the whole plant. That's just one element of the cannabis, CBD, which stands for cannabidiol. That CBD oil helps well with seizure disorder. It does well for inflammation, so people with MS, and things like that, joint issues. It can help gout. It helps beautifully with that. THC is the stuff that, quote unquote, gets you high, which in my opinion is a misnomer because I think you're more like low when you, like, ooh, dude, mellow if you have THC. But THC is the substance in my daughter's product that works. But it's not the only substance. The other substance is THCA, which is the acid form of THC, which is the non-psychoactive form of THC. So I could talk about this for an hour, and I'm sorry, but because I really do want to tell everybody what's going on with cannabis oil as it works with our body and the endocannabinoid system in our body. But because I don't have the time, when you flip this over in the back, please do take some time when you get home. If you're interested in learning more about medical cannabis, look at those little search suggestions down there. Endocannabinoid system. Does anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, not many. The reason why is because they're not teaching it in the medical facilities or medical training facilities where you become a doctor. What are those called? Colleges, that's it. You'd think I was smoking, but I'm not. I swear I'm not. So they're not teaching that in the schools yet, but we have an endocannabinoid system in our body. We have receivers in the cells in our brains that need the cannabinoids that are in the cannabis plant. Here's the deal. Cannabinoids are not just in the cannabis plant. They're in other foods that we eat. There's things in cannabis called terpenes. Terpenes are the flavor profile of the plant. Like I can tell you my daughter does really well with a particular terpene that's really skunky in smell. I mean, she poops weed, she burps weed, but it works for her. That rank, stinky, earthy smell, that terpene works really well for her. That's also found in other foods like mushrooms, like earthy, things that grow in the earth. There's terpenes like linalool, which is found in lavender. So we eat terpenes in other foods. They just also happen to be in the cannabis plant. What's going on now in the canna world is that people are starting to discover slowly that this is a beautiful plant that makes a beautiful medicine, and it was put here on this earth for a beautiful purpose, and that is to feed our systems if we need them. I am not a proponent of going out and smoking weed every night. I'm not telling you to do that. What I am saying is, I hope that you can open your minds and open your eyes and learn and research. If you think this might be something that would work for you or for one of your family members, research it. Spend the time. My name is Jennifer Conforti, Conforti. People will want to find out who my contacts are. People will want to find out more information. What I would ask you to do, if you're watching this, send me a message on Facebook. I always check my message box that isn't from friends, that goes into that whatever area. I check that every single day because I get messages every single day still from parents looking for information. But just put in something like that, like you were at the symposium or you saw me on Facebook Live or whatever, and I'll be happy to connect with you and help you determine if this might be something that would help you and your family. So thank you so much, y'all. Questions?